Okay, can I change a slide? Let's find out. I've managed. Has a slide changed for you?
Has.
Marvelous. So what are these networks for? Officially, they're for reflecting on literacy learning through P1 and practice. They're also really about supporting each other and hopefully a bit of a relax. For those of you who've had time to make a cup of tea, it's a chance to have a chat with other practitioners about what you're doing. It's a chance to meet the delightful Alasne, who is about to join us from NEN, and just have a quiet moment in the month for a bit of reflection and to maybe think developmentally about children's learning, which is the point of emerging literacy. So the only theory-laden bit of the evening, just a reminder about what emerging literacy is about. It's about saying that these 5 developmental skills underpin early literacy learning, and that the surer these are in children's beginning of their school journey, the longer term the impacts will be for attainment in the future. So when we see dips in attainment in the future, it's often because there are gaps in these skills or they're not very well automated. Well, we're going to go over and over this in the course of the year from a more practical perspective. So I'll just move on from that. Normally, we have a bit of a joke in my family, what we call the normally tour of the Highlands. People come to the Highlands in the summer. They come stay with me. They're looking forward to the beautiful scenery. And I take them, I don't know, up the Strui, and I point into the distance and I say, normally, you can see Golspie and Dunrobin Castle from here. And they say, oh, that's nice. But all we can see is a cloud and a rainstorm. So James's normally tours of the Highlands have become a bit of a kind of family joke. And I want to use that as a theme for this evening. So here is what I normally see. If I peek around my computer screen, that is what I would be seeing from my window normally now. On Saturday, it was a slightly different scene. So instead of this lovely, sheep may safely graze, it's all really lush, it's autumn, it's lovely, the rains came down and the floods came up, and there were poor little sheep clinging, as you can probably see, to a really, really small bit of land, wondering what's going to happen next. Was anyone going to come and rescue them? All really stormy. So that's my really clumsy metaphor for teaching in a pandemic and learning in a pandemic. So normally at this network in September and October, everyone would be coming along with phonological assessments completed. They'd have trackers colored in. We'd look at them. It'd be the same for the pencil control skills. People would be talking about how they'd made up groupings, how they'd addressed different skills gaps, how they'd been recording that on the trackers. If you've come to this network with all that in place, that's absolutely brilliant. And there's going to be a chance to talk about that in the breakout groups, and that's fantastic. That would be a normal emerging literacy year. But this year is different. Different classes, different teachers, different schools, different children may have had to prioritize different things. And that is so on message for emerging literacy, because emerging literacy is all about teaching the children who are in front of you and adapting to them, as opposed to getting too stuck into in a predefined program. So we're going to suggest this evening, there's really 4 ways into emerging literacy in 2020. So the first way is through doing all the phonological awareness assessments and fine motor assessments and observing scissor skills and goodness knows what. The second route is a bit more informal. I know a lot of people have been extending the use of play pedagogies in their classrooms, and there's loads of people in this meeting who've been taking a lead in that. So you may well have been doing much more informal observations. You might be using the early level progression to guide those and just using post-it notes or ticks or whatever to see where children are. And you might be clicking through the progression. It's a live document. You can click through to see what might support children who are at the different stages. And that'll take you to all the emerging literacy stuff, and you can customize it that way. You may be in the position where you still feel your class and you and your school and your community are still settling in. You may still be doing a lot of really basic relationship building, play and fun, or if what you find helps build relationships is to sit in rows and learn stuff, well, fine, whatever you're doing, you're still settling people in and you haven't really got around to sort of the emerging literacy stuff. And you may be coming along saying, well, we came to the stuff in June, but so much has happened since. What was emerging literacy? Again, I can't remember. And all of those 4 ways in are absolutely fine today, because that's where we are as a nation. So the first way in, yeah, you may have assessed phonological awareness, you may have assessed pencil control skills and be doing groupings and designing how you do your soft start and other things. And we've got some really experienced practitioners in the groups who'll be able to talk about that a bit more. You may be doing the second way in of observations using the progression. So we've got a really great early level literacy progression in Highland with lots of input from many practitioners and specialists. You can directly observe where children are on their journey to all the different benchmarks. And if you're wondering what to do, you can click on the blue links and it takes you straight through to all the emerging literacy tools that will help them make progress, and you can do your planning around that. So those are the two basic ways of doing this. In the old days, it always used to be through the formal assessments and then adjusting, but some practitioners find it easier to use a progression framework. On the other hand, it's 2020, so you may be still settling in and thinking, what was all this about again? So we're going to do a little poll. This is totally anonymous. No one will know what you put, but we'd just like to ask you, well, which way are you at the moment? So we're giving you 4 choices. If you can go to menti.com and put in the code that you can see on the screen, I'll put it in the text messages in just a minute, or maybe one of my colleagues can, because I can't do one thing at a time, let alone 2. Just let us know, have you done all the assessments and you're rinky-dink? Are you doing observations using progression? Are you not really doing much because you're still settling them in? Or are you still in the slight confused.com position? So just menti.com, the code, Leo and Jenny put it in and just put stuff. Promise it's totally anonymous. Nobody will know, and this data won't be shared. It'll just give us a little steer about how to do the breakout groups where you can discuss this in more detail. Okay, we'll give you a couple of minutes. We've had 4 responses, 24 to go. I should say it's not compulsory as well. We can't put pressure on people on video. In the room, you can look around and eyeball them, but you can't. Anyway, have a go. Let us know where you are.
Right.
I'm going to give you another 20 seconds. We've got 11. Feels like one of those shopping channels where you're trying to get people, press the button, buy the Hoover, or whatever it is they sell. Is it Hoovers they sell? Sort of exercise stuff, isn't it? Okay. Any more? Okay, so that's kind of about the balance I was expecting, actually. So a lot of people have done the assessments, some people are using the progression, and a few people are still settling in or what's emerging literacy again. Okay, so I'm going to ask basically the same question again, but in terms of your plans for next term, looking ahead in the term October, are you planning to complete the assessments or carry on with those? Are you planning to use the progression in your observations, or are you sitting there thinking this is still all a bit much for us? And we'll use this particular slide to plan how we do the breakout groups in just a minute. So let us know where you are with that. I'd love to know who that first person was who did it before I even put the slide on. That was amazing. Okay. Any more? Great. Can the various people leading the groups, can you just imprint that on your heads as to where people are? It'll obviously be slightly different in the different groups, but just so we know what people are doing and what you can chat about. Okay. Because we'll use the breakout groups basically, I mean, you'll probably all go in different directions, but the idea is maybe to use the breakout groups to have a chat about the planning of that and how you're going to do that, and supporting each other with ideas around that. With the usual emerging literacy strapline, but anything that meets the needs of the kids is what we do. Okay, so that's enough from me. I will, in about 10 minutes, make a complete mess of putting you into the various groups, so you can look forward to that. But in the meantime, it's really time for practitioners to come in. So Anna and Leah and Sharon, do you want to come in and just, whatever you want to say at this point will be great about your experiences of doing this. And then Becca, Sharon and Jen, do you want to round it off. That would be brilliant. And then we'll go into breakout groups. Okay, I'm going to mute myself with great joy if I can find the mute button. Where's the mute button? Can't find it. Let me know if you need the screen, any of you. I can't find the mute button, so I'm just going to say it.
Well, I talk a little bit about how I've used it mainly in P1, and then Leah, I know you do it throughout the school, so you could talk your experience to that. And Siobhan, I don't know if you want to talk about this year or anything like that, but I can just kind of talk about if it was a typical year, what I'd typically do. So thinking about phonological awareness and how to incorporate that into your planning and how to group the children, the first thing I do is I use the developmental overviews, which look like, if I cover up names, which you should get passed on from the EYPs that have worked with the pupils. There's copies on Highland literacy, but you'll notice along the top there is elements that definitely impact on literacy and those foundational literacy skills. So that's always a good place to start, because if there's a child where there's blanks, so if they've not been coloured in, that means it's something they've not yet shown to a practitioner that's working with them, or they haven't demonstrated it. And if it's yellow, then it's something that you want to continue. So I start with those, and there's different ways you could do it. Some people like to put it on a spreadsheet so they can see where the most common gaps are in a group or in a class. Some people prefer to look at it as individuals. I tend to do both and have a think, right, what key experiences need to be available in my classroom because they're still developing that. And then, is there any individuals that I'm going to need extra support with or extra work with? And I just keep them as a working document and scribble on them when they've kind of achieved something. And then moving into phonological awareness, that's kind of the first thing I would do in this term. So I use the phonological awareness assessments, which are on Highland Literacy if anyone wants to pop a link. And I do that with all the children. And it is quite a task to kind of sit for 10 to 15 minutes with an individual, particularly in a busy space or you've got a big class. But it's really worthwhile if you're the one who's doing the assessments, because then you can see how the children answer the questions and approach the tasks. And that gives you a really good indication of, oh, they've got no clue about word boundaries, or they've got some clue, it's just not consistent. And then from that, you can kind of group them depending on where they come out. So if there's a few children who need word boundaries practice, it would be ideal if they were in a group. If there's a few children that have not many skills at all, then obviously you want them to be together. And if there's a group of children that are maybe already reading, already achieved all those skills, then you can take them further as well. Because that's the idea about the developmental approach, is that you're meeting the children where they're at and then taking them on, as opposed to doing the same for every child. However, it tends to be there's similar things that crop up every year. And for me, rhyme often comes up and word boundaries as something that most children find challenging. So then I try and pick a book or pick an interest that's really going to hook them in with all these different adult-directed activities. So like Room on the Broom is a really good one for this time of year. Children love it, and you can do loads of word boundaries and rhyme play and things with that. And then the other kind of assessments are more observational based. So they look like this. I've just put post-its to cover up names and things. This is one that I've completed from a year before, so that's why there's lots of ticks across it, so that I can see progression. But the idea is this, I mean, this is typed as an example, but it would be on your clipboard, and anytime you see a child who's maybe using a tripod grasp, or any child who's getting faster at some of these tasks, then you can tick that off as something that's achieved. And these can be things in their child-led learning that you observe and that you want to take notice of, or if there's something that you've set up as a support group or a little fine motor activity, then you can pull that group together to practice those gaps. There's one for fine motor, one for scissor skills, and one for pre-writing. And that, plus the phonological awareness, kind of encompasses all the kind of literacy learning that I'm focusing on during term one. That doesn't mean we're not doing reading and we're not doing writing, because a lot of it is oral stories and oral writing and mark making and all different areas in the classroom. But they're like the focus for my teaching groups in term one, to ensure that those foundational skills are really secure. So that's what I would do in a typical P1, P2 class. Leah, I don't know if you want to talk kind of using it for gaps further up the school.
Yeah, I can also see the people there that are like, but I've got a 1 to 4 composite, what do I do? Because that's so common. A lot of this is around primary 1, but that's not exclusive to primary 1. It is about being developmental. So even if you have a primary 1 to 4 composite, I have a primary 1 to 7 composite this year. So I'm enjoying the challenges that brings in terms of emerging literacy. But my go-to for emerging literacy in up the school or further on in the school is for children who are struggling with literacy or have literacy difficulties. So that's always my starting point. If I have a child who's really struggling with reading, if I have a child who's really struggling grasping literacy concepts in the classroom, the first thing I'll say to teachers is go and check their emerging literacy skills. Because quite often you'll find that primary 6 who's managed to get all the way to primary 6 and can't actually break down syllables. Now, I know that when I go to spell something, write something, read something, the first thing I do is break it into syllables. And that's such an important skill that we don't always explicitly teach. Now, I remember I had the whole school, we identified in the school that something they couldn't do with syllables. So we ended up in assembly, and one of our assembly bits was getting them all up and about and counting out words and walking around and Halloween words. If we had our Halloween assembly and it was pumpkin and we played games and things like that. There's so many ways you can involve all the children in it, and so many ways that you can make it appropriate to their level while it being developmentally appropriate. So where it's age appropriate, even though we're working at an early level developmental stage. So things like, and you can bring it into PE. When we're in PE, well, words that rhyme with cat, and you pass it round, and you just do it at their stage. Words that rhyme with cat, okay, that's primary 1. Words that rhyme with, I went to say turtle there, and then I was like, no, but as you get harder, as you get up, don't use turtle, you'll be stuck for ages. But as you get further up the scale, obviously start to make it more appropriate. Start to use themed words, all these kind of things. So that's what, good work. There goes a couple, but I couldn't think on the spot. So yeah, we can do things like that. You can think in themes, you can think, yeah, totally, Rebecca, non-words are allowed. So you can talk about rhyming words and nonsense words and all those kind of things. So up the scale, it is easy to adapt. And I think we got stuck for a while at Networks before where people were thinking, this is only for primary 1, and they couldn't see how they can adapt it. Now, what I do in my classroom is, in mental math, you always do mental maths. Everyone in here does maths warm-ups, but how many people can genuinely say they do literacy warm-ups? So that's what I do. This is what I base my literacy warm-ups on now. When I've got my 2 to 7s, we might do word boundaries as our literacy warm-ups. So my wee ones will work on smaller sentences and things like that, but then my older ones might work with bigger sentences. So things like that, I might have them creating sentences, the older ones with 5. Can you create a sentence with 5 word boundaries in it? And then they can use it with the younger children in the class. So it's just about taking the same developmental concepts and making them age appropriate to the children in your classroom. And if it's not within your classroom, if it's intervention, there's lots and lots of ways that you can do that. And as I say, if you are doing any literacy interventions, I would highly suggest that the first thing you do is look at the phonological awareness assessments. And handwriting, we've got a big push on handwriting this year, and one of the things that we've tried to do is try to use the pencil concept. So we've gone all the way back to the start and then moved into the pencil concept to assess them. So there's a whole breadth of stuff there that can be used across the school. Just don't be scared to do it. And even the assessments, like you might think, oh, they're far too easy. Yeah, perfect, Jenny, seize the moment as well. And I think there's that element of looking at the phonological awareness assessment and thinking that's going to be so easy for my primary 6s. But that's fine if they've got all the phonological awareness concepts. If they don't, it's not easy. And make that appropriate as well. Change the sentences with the same amount of word boundaries, but appropriate to their age. Change the sentence to be about Harry Potter. Change it, anything like that. As long as it's got the same concepts, it can be done. So that's me on my pedestal, so I'll come off now. So I'll pass on to Sharon, okay?
Hi everyone. I'm in primary 1 this year. This is my 5th year in primary 1, but using emerging literacy as my 4th year now. So when I started out in primary 1, it was very different from what I'm doing now, and that's thanks to looking at the emerging literacy approaches and being developmentally appropriate. So I feel that my teaching style has completely changed over the last 5 years in primary 1. And I'm really grateful for that, because when I think back to my very first primary 1, I don't think I met their phonological needs very well at all. So I'm really glad that I've had this opportunity to work with the team before in the groups when we were based in Invergord and Alness, and that really helped me develop my skills with phonological awareness. Like Anna said, I look back at the developmental overviews from nursery, and that's especially this year with COVID, they're incomplete. So I think it's really beneficial to go back and look at them and see where the gaps are, where the children have come from nursery a few months ago, but see if those gaps have actually, more gaps have developed because they may have forgotten some things from being in nursery 6 months ago now, or see have those gaps actually closed because they were working on those things at home over lockdown. So that's been really beneficial. And then going on to using the phonological awareness screening has been really good. And one of my children in particular, it's really flagged up some difficulties that I didn't know they had. I think there's possibly a processing difficulty, so I'm now able to try and get some more help for that child through these assessments. And had I not carried it out on a sort of whole class basis or group basis, I wasn't aware of these difficulties, but having that one-to-one time, it really flagged it up for me, and I'm able to put that support in for that person. So yeah, sorry, I feel like I'm waffling because I'm sort of just
You are no way waffling.
volunteered at the last minute. So hopefully that made sense.
Great.
Shall I jump in from an SLT perspective? Yeah. Thank you, lead practitioners, and new recruit lead practitioner as well. I always think it's so inspiring to sit here and listen to practitioners when they talk about how they use the materials. Sometimes I think if we lifted you guys up and put you in a different forum and we didn't say what your profession was, people would be saying like, that could be a speech and language therapist, or the way that they talk about handwriting, that could be an OT. And that's what we really wanted when we sat around that table so many years ago and designed this as a multi-agency team. Sorry, my toddler is sat right next to me. Yes, darling. Yes, that's Peppa Pig. Yes. iPads needs a must at a certain time. So what I wanted to really touch on today is kind of, James has already touched on it a little bit. This year will be different from other years. We're not expecting everybody to be as engaged as they have been at previous years. Although when you look at the figures, the polls, a lot of people have already engaged with the assessments, which is great. If there are any questions about the assessment or how that was carried out before we go into breakout rooms, that might be worthwhile if people wanted to type those in or speak those just while the speech and language therapists are here and the occupational therapist is here around the assessments and the observational tools before we split into breakout rooms. Now's your opportunity to pop that in the chat bar. And I guess the other thing I wanted to raise awareness of is, yes, the wondrous word boundaries and rhyme are always every year gaps across all areas. And when we took this across the Northern Alliance and we looked at all those different authorities, it still came back as word boundaries and rhyme. And when you look at young children or older children further up the school, again, it can be rhyme. That's an area of difficulty. What I want to say just briefly about rhyme is that, yes, it is a phonological awareness skill, but it is also heavily dependent on a child's vocabulary and language level. So when we see these gaps around rhyme, we have to think about how much language has that child got to draw on, because if you haven't got a great vocabulary, then it's harder for you to generate rhyme. And we will be talking about vocabulary, what words to explore, and words up strategies in later networks. So yeah, that's probably me just getting off my soapbox now. I'm going to hand over to Sharon. She may have something else that she wants to put forward from an SLT perspective, and then we'll pass over to Jen.
I think you pretty much covered it, but I think that idea, when we were talking about what rhymes with turtle, there was a few of us that were racking our brains, but that was very much dependent on our vocabulary knowledge, and the few people that jumped in really quickly, like James obviously has a very good vocabulary knowledge enough to jump in with a few examples there. but very much dependent on our vocabulary knowledge. But I think you covered most of it there, Becca. So I'll pass over to Jen, I think, to jump in.
This is testing my IT skills of unmuting myself. Yeah, I think I did miss some of it. My computer insisted on a restart halfway through that. But I think just listening to what I did of the lead practitioners, that you've covered a lot around the sort of handwriting and the fine motor skills, just very much a play-based approach at this point, and looking at all the pencil control concepts and sort of the activity ideas around that. I'm aware that there's a lot of information on all the areas on the website, and it can be a little bit overwhelming, I think. So, you know, just to let you know that the whole team's here, and I think, I suppose the different ways of working, but I think for us, we're a lot more, well, we always have been available, but we're even more available remotely. So if you do have any questions, don't feel you have to wait for a network, just fire a question in. And if you're not sure who your question's for, just fire it at anybody, and we can pass it on to the right person. So don't feel you've got to have the right question for the right person, or even know, even if it's just a general help, or you just want to chat, feel free to just get in touch.
Brilliant, Jen. Thanks. Yeah, it's really important. This is a process and a dialogue, and it's all about practitioner support to adapt to the kids. I'm just kind of I've had a really terrible day today for lots of reasons, and I am my faith in humanity, my faith in education is utterly restored from listening to Anna and Leah and Sharon and AHP colleagues. So I hope everyone's found that useful. I'm really struck by this idea of why don't we have literacy warm-ups through the school. It's a great idea, isn't it? Yeah. And something which comes through. So these gaps are normal. Just because we start in P1 doesn't mean that human development takes any notice of that. These gaps are totally normal at P1 entry. They're normal to persist into the school. So we just need to adapt the teaching and learning to them and try and fill them as best we can. Because a lot of it's just base biology. It's biological maturation, and we're working around it. But for some kids, it's gaps in experience. And so we're actually trying to give them the catch up, and the strategies are the same for both. But you know, as Leah was saying, we pick up kids in P6, P7. We pick up kids in S4 who are writing really poor exam answers because they have really poorly consolidated basic pencil control skills. And the idea here is putting all this work into P1 is to try and catch as many as we can, so they don't have to wait that long. But some will. There can be, because of different maturational timescales and all kinds of other things. So they will be picked up. Fantastic. So it is now breakout rooms. Jenny has put links in the text boxes, okay? And that slightly begs the question of who's in which room. So Jenny, shall I try and share this Word document, or do you want to do it?
You can share that Word document. Also to say that I've got some people, sorry, what were you going to say, James?
If I share it, will you talk about it? Because I'll just mess with that. Okay,
I will.
I'll share it. Right.
So while James is sharing that, just to say there are some people who aren't on my list already, so I'm going to have to read out a few names of some people that hadn't registered. So Beth Henderson, would you go into room 1, please? And Fraser Welsh, could you go into room 2? Selina Leng, could you go into room 3? Rona Nicholson, could you go into room 4? And Karen Henderson, could you go into room 1? So I think none of those people should be on this list here. If you can see the list, in room 1 with Leah is going to be, I don't think Erin is here, Eleanor Lee, Georgina Anderson, Kerry Challoner, Becky Cameron, Louise Passmore, Julie Wilson and Joy Milne. And so you'll see the link there if you just click on that. And it would be a good idea if you could click off, just delete, you know, press the cross so that you come out of this room so that there isn't any sort of doubling up of sound. Then in breakout room 2 with Anna Shemild, we've got Selina Stewart. Oh, in fact, I think Selina, is it yourself that's under Selina Leng? It doesn't matter. Then Gillian.
Sorry.
That's fine. So Selina, you don't need to go into room 3 because you're in room 2.
Okay,
then Gillian Penman, Rachel Patterson, Emily Scott, Jennifer Henderson, Heather Gilbertson, Ruth Mackay and Ailey MacArthur. Then in breakout room 3 with Sharon, we've got Diana McQueen, Marion Gray, Beta Bigus, Liz McIntosh, Alison Howie, Jill Quigley, and Kirsty Lang. And then in breakout 4, we've got Laura Carson. This is with Rebecca and Sharon, Laura Carson, Anne McInnes, Jane McDermott, Alicia Cowie, Karen Henderson, Krista Monroe, and Chala McLean. If your name hasn't been mentioned, could you please just go to probably room 1? And I'm seeing Beth, that's fine when there's 2 of you from the one household. Yes, go into whichever room you feel you need to, room 2. That's great, no problems there at all. So we've got a bit of wriggle room with each of the rooms, so it doesn't really matter if you end up in the wrong room. And I will see you all, because I will pop into each room to say hello and make sure you're all there. And just to say that if anybody needs access, just hang on until I get to your room for access.
Okay. I'm going to hang on in this room for a while, just in case everything goes pear-shaped.
Okay, I'll be back in there again as well. So.
Okay, I shall sit here and not go near any coal buckets. Okay, cheers everyone. Hope you have great discussions. I look forward to listening.
Okay. Leah, are you on your own at the moment? That's good. I'll come back and see if there's anybody is asking for access. If you just wait, and I'll be back in a moment. So that was very specific.
Are you in more than one room, Jenny? This is impressive.
What, Jenny Wilson?
Yeah.
I'm going between them all to make sure. Hello.
Amazing.
I'm just checking to see there's nobody trying to get in that can't get in. You're good to go. Everything good to go? Just saying, is everything good to go? Have you seen Becca? Not yet, okay. So maybe just start chatting around whatever your agendas are to do with this. That'd be great. And I'll pop back in a wee while. Thank you.
Becca's back.
Okay, thank you.
Here we go. Is this my room?
Becca, you're room 4? I think, is that right? So do you see on the chat?
No, because I lost the chat because I got kicked out.
All right.
Wait, hold on. I've got it on my email. Hold on.
Okay, it's on the chat now.
I'm sending it again. There you go. Oh no, that's not it.
It's on the chat.
Thank you.
It's there.
See if that works.
Room 4.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Great.
Because if you go out, you lose the whole chat history.
Yes, I put it back up again for us. You should have that. Becca, Beth, are you struggling to find a room? Can you unmute your mic so I can talk to you, please? I'm still not hearing you, Beta. It's Control B, isn't it, James? What's the...
Control D.
D. If you do Control and D, that should help you unmute your mic, Beta. So Beta, you were in room, it doesn't really matter which room you go into, so just
3.
choose a room 3.
3.
And if you just click in the chat, do you want me to put it in the chat again for you, just in case you've been kicked out? If you click on room 3, I'm going to go into room 3 just in case you're trying to get access.
Right. I think my microphone is now on, so you can
You're
hear
back on.
me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I did it, and I was waiting when someone will accept me.
Yeah. Jenny
You're,
will go do that now.
I've given you access now. So I've just granted you access, so you should be able to go through no problem. Try again. I'll go back into the room again. Peter, you still not managing to get there?
Pardon?
Are you still not managing to get in?
Yes, I am in room 3.
All right.
Fantastic.
Okay, could I get you to click the cross on this room as well, so that you're not in the main room too? So right at the very top, you'll see the first meet. If you just click on that cross, that will take you out of this room.
Oh, close the tab. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't.
Right at the very top, you'll see meet CZR, and so on. If you click on the cross beside the red dot, it will take you out of this room.
Sorry, I
And-
cannot hear you because they are talking now, so I don't know what to do. Sorry. Jenny, can you say again what shall I do now?
Click, there's a tab at the top of your screen. It says Meet CZR.
I cannot see this. I
Right
don't have this.
at the very top. It's
No, I
where
can't. Nothing is on.
Okay. Okay, I think then we'll not be talking, so you'll just be to listen to the other group.
Yeah.
Okay.
What, Jenny? What if we both leave this for call will close, and then you'll be fine.
You are not just a pretty face, James.
That should put you in. You should be fine. We'll go. That's the easiest way. Okay.